Well, excellent. Thank you all for coming back for session two. Good to see everybody. I had a chance to review my video from last week, and I realized I sprinted through a lot of that. Guys, that was a big chunk. Tonight will be much more digestible. Um, so I am going to work to be consciously slower as we work our way through this stuff tonight. But it's good to be back with you. Um, so I'd like to open us up with an opening prayer tonight. You guys can hear me okay? Yes. Okay. Awesome. The earbuds are working tonight. It's a good thing. Okay. So I'm going to share an opening prayer for us tonight, and maybe this will kind of set the tone for the evening. So the opening prayer goes like this. Dear God of unending compassion, so far today, I've done all right. I haven't gossiped. I haven't lost my temper. I haven't been greedy, grumpy, nasty, selfish, or overindulgent. I'm very thankful for that. But in a few minutes, God, I'm going to be getting out of bed. And from then on, I'm probably going to need a lot more help. Amen. Anybody relate with this? I'm like, I'm off to a great start. I haven't put my feet on the floor yet. So how bad can things be? Anyway, good opening prayer for tonight. We're gonna have fun. Um, okay. So this is the opening reflection I have for tonight. You can read along on the screen, or you can close your eyes and take it in. And this is when I do my opening reflections. What this is a sort of a precursor for the content of the evening. So it won't necessarily relate to what we did last week, but it's just going to try to set up what we're going to talk about tonight. And it goes like this. As they traveled, Jesus entered a village where a woman named Martha welcomed him to her home. She had a sister named Mary who seated herself at Jesus' feet and listened to his words. Martha, who was busy with all the details of hospitality, came to Jesus and said, Rabbi, don't you care that my sister has left me all alone to do the household tasks? Tell her to help me. Jesus replied, Martha, Martha, you're anxious and upset about so many things, but only a few things are necessary, really only one. Mary has chosen the better part, and she won't be deprived of it. Um, Everybody here familiar with the Enneagram, at least on some level? Show of hands. I think that's okay. Yeah. So you'll remember that in the Enneagram, there's of the nine types, there are what they call head types, which are numbers 5, 6, and 7, heart types, which are 2, 3, and 4, and body types, which are numbers 8, 9, and 1. They correspond with the work description of centers, which we'll get in tonight. But what this I think this scripture tries to capture is that each of us has a Mary and a Martha in us, and according to the work, 985 other I's. We have 985 other Dianes and Shannons and Mercies. So it's going to talk about, and I highlighted that last part, chosen the better part. So what you're going to find is that we're going to focus on learning about centers tonight as a big piece of it. And there's going to be a time when we can choose the right center for the right thing, because oftentimes they don't work in harmony, they work out of order. And to illustrate this visually, I have a video that I want to share with you called Unveiling the Elephant, the Power of Perspective. So just a couple of minutes, so we'll take a look at this.
Once upon a time, there were 6 blind men who had never seen an elephant before. One day, they heard that an elephant had come to their village, and they were eager to learn what it was like. The first blind man approached the elephant and touched its side. "An elephant is like a wall," he said. The second blind man approached the elephant and touched its tusk. "No, an elephant is like a spear," he said. The third blind man approached the elephant and touched its trunk. You are both wrong. An elephant is like a snake, he said. The fourth blind man approached the elephant and touched its leg. An elephant is like a tree trunk, he said. The fifth blind man approached the elephant and touched its ear. An elephant is like a fan, he said. The sixth blind man approached the elephant and touched its tail. You are all wrong. An elephant is like a rope, he said. The blind men began to argue, each one convinced that he was right. But then a wise man came along and said, You are all correct. An elephant is like a wall, a spear, a snake, a tree trunk, a fan, and a rope. But you can only understand what an elephant is like if you put all of your experiences together. My dear friends, this story teaches us that we all have different perspectives and experiences, and it is important to listen to and respect each other's viewpoints. We must remember that our understanding of the world is limited by our own experiences, and we can only gain a fuller understanding by watching to others and putting all of our experiences together. Thank you for watching, and may peace be upon you. If you enjoy stories like this,
Okay. So this video to me describes metaphorically how our personalities are made up. So each person, again, is made up of three centers, which we'll get into. There's the body, or what we call the moving center. There's the emotional center and the intellectual center. But if you've done any kind of study of the Enneagram and you found your number that you identify with, that's your dominant or go-to perspective that you'll more automatically take the world through. So if you're intellectual, it's going to be through reason and logic. Body might be sensation, emotion might be the affective or the emotional part. So again, we can think about the heart types and the head types and the body types of the Enneagram. But I think what I was trying to illustrate with this video is that our point of view, the dominant way, the dominant center that each of us will take the world through, is a view from a point. Our point of view is a view from a point. And it's important to see that my way is a way, but it's out of many ways. And what they were talking about here is putting all the experiences together to learn how to feel when it's appropriate to feel, to learn how to think and use reason when it's appropriate to do so, and to learn how to trust the body when it's appropriate to do so. So those are my explorations. I'm going to just share last week's exploration, and then we'll stop recording, and we'll see what's come up for you all. So this was what we were asked to do: read the introduction through the 4 levels of consciousness. So whatever book you were in. And then the exploration was just to do this. This was only to self-observe how you get mechanically negative. This could be a habitual regret, or a habitual shame, or a habitual anxiety, habitual complaining, or feeling offended. Any number. That's just a handful. So I gave you guys the first work idea, which was I have this right not to be negative. Do you have a right to be negative? Yes. And we don't need to practice that. Everybody seems to know how to do that right out of the gate. But this idea that you have this choice in a moment or retrospectively. So what I said here, see if you can apply that idea in the moment of what you're consciously experiencing, or after the fact, if it was some kind of a historical situation or event, and see if it helps you change your inner state. So we'll talk about inner state a little bit tonight. Could it end up changing it to being something more peaceful or hopeful or pleasant? Okay. And I just wanted to share through, I skipped over that slide last week and I forgot to put it into this week's presentation, but I'm just going to quickly go through the sharing guidelines that we're going to have for the time we do this. So the guidelines will go like this, and I'll put them in an email, the email recap tomorrow. We listen attentively and without interruption when someone else is speaking. We do not give advice. We do not criticize what others share. We work against the urge to respond to what others share unless that person asks a question of the group. We listen deeply, and we self-observe any reactions or judgments we're having. We share experiences from our own lives not abstract ideas, using I statements. I experienced, I felt, I thought. We gather to care and to work, not to cure and remove crisis or pain. God does the healing. We are encouraged to share experiences in the group as it can be a powerful and transforming for each of us and all of us. However, we are always free to remain silent if we wish. We keep the sharing in the group confidential. So as Anna will do here in any second, we'll shut off the recording, and I'm going to stop sharing for now so I can. Well, thanks. Thank you for all the shares. Really enjoyed it. That's awesome. Okay, let me go back to sharing. I think everything is good. Okay. Everybody still there? All right, good. Okay. So if you read so the section that you're going to read this week, the format that Rebecca Nottingham has in the book, she actually, in the section that I'm having you read this week, she actually has centers at the end of that section. I actually put it in the front because I think it's really important to kind of lay the groundwork for centers before we talk about some of these other sort of bigger, heady concepts. But let me go ahead and get into the centers. Okay. So each human being consists of 3 centers. We have the instinctive moving center, or the body center, sometimes referred to. We have the emotional center, and we have the intellectual center. So oftentimes in the work, and again, please forgive this sort of masculine language of man number one. It's human number one, and you'll get into the commentaries. There's lots of male language. So, again, please try to forgive that. I try to unplug that as much as I can. But they'll refer to man number one as the person that's in the body. So for those people that identify as body types on the Enneagram, so I'm a body type. I identify as a 1 on the Enneagram. So 8, 9, and 1 would be associated with what they refer to as man number one in the work. If you're a heart type, emotionally center driven, you would be what they would refer to as man number 2. So 2, 3, and 4 on the Enneagram. And then man number 3 is what they refer to as intellectual center driven. So again, 5, 6, and 7 on the Enneagram would be associated with those. Again, the moving center can and does operate instinctively. So your moving center is real interesting. I mean, your body kind of does its own thing, right? It's breathing. Last time I checked, we don't have to breathe ourselves, right? It's got a functionality. It's got a performing system, right? You eat some food, it breaks it down and digests it. We don't have to be actively involved in. That's why it's also kind of referred to as instinctive. There's an element to it. It breathes us. It digests our food. It moves the body without our help, right? I mean, we blink our eyes. We don't have to pay attention to that. So I think you kind of get the sense of that. The emotional center is the location of your feelings and your desires. The intellectual center is where your thoughts come from. It uses logic and reason in responding to the outer world. And remember what I mentioned earlier is the emotional center here, guys, drives the bus. The work says that it reacts 30,000 times. And I don't know, that's a kind of an interesting number, 30,000 times faster than the intellectual center. So it's like the idea is that if you have a sudden instance that happens where you're surprised, you're resentful, you feel offended, you feel the emotion before you've had any chance to figure out what the hell's going on, right? I mean, there's no intellectual conversation. It's an emotion first. So it drives and often drives a reaction from us. Sometimes it's just an interior feeling. Sometimes it might be a comment. Sometimes it might be an action. The thoughts come slower, more methodically, but they can change more easily. So in other words, you can change the way you think easier than you can change the way you feel. Okay? We often, and all of our life is a function of and is controlled by centers. We often use the wrong center and the wrong energies for the task, making us less competent and wasting energy. So that you'll hear about in the work, you'll hear about leaking force. What they're really talking about is that if we're hung up in emotional center where a logical approach to something or getting in the body could be the way that we could use energy. If you think about energy as finite, right? You sleep, you eat food for energy. All this energy allows us to do anything. It allows us to move. It allows us to think. It allows us to feel, right? So you have a finite amount of energy, and it's about using it in the right way, so to speak. So you can think of a time where a clear head could have served us better than an emotional mechanical feeling or attitude. Or imagine using your intellectual center to walk down the stairs. This is kind of interesting. Or think about riding a bike. If you use your intellectual center to go down the stairs, it's going to be a real interesting ride. Right? So if you're at the top of the stairs, you think, I'm going to use intellectual center. Okay, I lift my right leg, I put it out. I lower my right leg, I shift my weight to my right hip. I move forward, I lift my left. So if you start going down, it's this herky-jerky movement. And it's kind of like studying the work at the beginning. It is very wonky. It's think about when you learned how to ride a bike, right? Your parent, whoever taught you how to ride a bike said, okay, keep pedaling, keep your eyes on the street. Keep the steering wheel straight or whatever. And you're running through this methodical thing of tasks. And at some point in time, muscle memory takes over and you're riding a bike. Now you don't think about it. And we can all get on, they always say you can't forget how to ride a bike. You can get on a bike and all of a sudden you're riding. You don't have to think about it anymore. So that's when the moving center kind of steps in and flows. We are given a physical body at birth that is organized and that works. And I talked about that. We're given our shell right at birth. But the emotional and the intellectual centers are what we acquire in life. And they're not organized and they're constantly interfering with other centers. We often use the wrong centers or the wrong energies for the task, making us less competent, wasting energy. All centers have different, what they call minds. We'll get into the minds in a bit. So they each have their own agenda. The emotional center has its thing, the intellectual center has this thing, the body wants to do a different thing. Each is designed for a different purpose and use. Okay, so understanding centers. So the centers are here and they kind of map, if you remember when I drew that slide a couple of slides ago, where it starts at the bottom, you see motion and sensation. That would be the moving body center. The second one up is the emotional center. And the third one up is the intellectual center. So you're seeing thought there. These centers, although part of us, do not work in unison. Intellectual center, thought, and emotional center, emotions, are subdivided into lower and higher centers. So you're going to hear about lower centers a lot. And what they mean by that is that it's if you're in the lower emotional center, you're habitually reacting. You're habitually feeling offended. There's not any, you're not even active in it. It's just I might have a thought that this person doesn't know how to drive, right? Well, that's a thought, but I'm in the lower part of the intellectual center there. There's not any consciousness. It's just a habitual thing. But here's where you're going to have the opportunity for transformation, because what you'll talk about here is higher emotional center and higher mental center. So there's an element of divine inspiration that can come through the higher part of the intellectual center and the higher part of the emotional center. The beginning of one's self-observation begins when we can notice which center has the microphone. So which one is the body, is the pressure in my chest, what's got the microphone right now, and then it's the body. If it's my emotion, obviously that's emotional center. If it's my justification, it might be intellectual center that has the microphone. We must be able to identify the activities of our different centers so that we can work with them, organize them, and purify them. Our possible growth or evolution comes from our ability to pick up on and receive the influences in our higher mental center and higher emotional center. So those are the areas where you're going to have the opportunity for divine intervention, we'll say. And this is from Maurice Nicoll. The work teaches that there are in us fully developed two higher centers that are sending their influences down on us continually, only we cannot hear them. These centers communicate with influences coming from higher centers. The object of the work is to cleanse our lower centers, which are the sort of habitual low-level reactions, clear them out to open their windows so that they can begin to transmit these ideas and directions coming from the higher centers, right? Coming from divine influence. Again, if you don't quite get this, you'll probably understand it better as you read it. So these centers think they're in charge. So the things that keep us stuck in the lowest functions of our ordinary centers are the following. We are hypnotized by external life and our responses to it. The lower parts of these centers require no attention, no effort. We attribute full consciousness to ourselves, and so don't even realize that we are asleep. We aren't aware that we have a choice to awaken from this sleep and change the quality of our being. We don't realize our true position on this earth or our real meaning for being here. We choose, without knowing, to remain asleep in the comfortable, effortless, automatic habits of our physical, emotional, and mental centers. Okay. 7 kinds of man. So we talked about man 1, man 2, and man 3 earlier, right? So each one, and you see them on the left-hand side, each person, each man number 1, number 2, and number 3 are all still man asleep. And they kind of show them, what's difficult about this chart for me is they kind of show them they are showing them in an ascension as far as levels of consciousness. But I think what I need you to understand is that for levels, man 1, 2, and 3, they're all identical. 3 is not higher than 2, 2 is not higher than 1. They're just showing them that way on the chart. If I'm a body type, if I'm an emotional type, if I'm an intellectual type, and I'm predominantly in that particular center only, I'm still man asleep. Okay, so I'm still in the waking state. Okay. So the center of gravity is one of these. I'm sorry. The center of gravity is one of these 3 body centers of man, right? So you're either physical, you're emotional, or you're intellectual as kind of your dominant go-to. All of these categories of people are asleep, each in their own perspective. This renders them blind to other perspectives. Now, that kind of gets back to the video of the elephant, right? So each person had their own perspective on what an elephant was. In this case, if I'm a body type, I'm more out of touch with influences of intellectual or emotional center. And the same goes for any of these other ones. Which body of your center of gravity is in does not signify intelligence or level of being. So we get to let me go backwards here. So man number 4 is what they call man awakening, right? So that's what they call the 3rd state of consciousness is man number 4. Balanced man or man awakening is what they call number 4. It's characterized by the 3rd state of consciousness where help is possible, self-remembering, self-consciousness, and self-awareness is available. Balanced man is not one-sided. So it's not just emotional or intellectual or physical body. They are working on all and developing all their functions so that they can do everything in different centers, make it possible for them to do acting from the appropriate center. They possess self-awareness, self-consciousness, and they remember themselves. Humans at this level understand each other. This is important. Humans at this level number 4, understand each other. They no longer judge each other, and they can receive help and influences from above. They have an open, receptive disposition. Balanced man is the bridge to conscious man, which would be levels 5, 6, and 7. Man number 5, man number 6, and man number 7. It's often said that Jesus was man number 7. So what we are aiming at in this work is the 4th level of consciousness. We would like to become man awake. This is also called the conscious circle of humanity and is made up of man 5, 6, and 7. Sometimes it's called in certain faith traditions the communion of saints or the kingdom of heaven. You can hear, you have ears to hear. and receive higher influences. Help can reach us. Yes, Susan.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
Can we go back to Balanced Man, Man Awakening?
Mm-hmm.
I heard you a couple times say appropriate, responding from an appropriate center.
Yeah.
And my understanding, I don't know why I thought this, was that Balanced Man was all three centers at the same time online. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, they all three are available, but what it's saying is that Balanced Man can understand which center is appropriate for to be utilized. So, like I said,
At
if
an
you're
event.
right, right,
Okay.
right. So where if somebody's an emotionally centered person, man number two, well, they're going to unfortunately their go-to is going to be an affective or an emotional response to things in general. Whether maybe there should be time that we could get in the body, or maybe there's time where we could use some logic and reason without emotion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Balanced Man says, okay, there's a time when this is to affect the heart, and the emotion is the way to is should be the lead dog in the pack versus intellectual, or versus the body, or body sensation. Does that make sense? So Balanced Man just
Yeah.
basically has this understanding that they know the right center to use, and they use the right center.
Got it.
Right.
Thank you.
And yeah. And so, and I think what's really important is that when you'll hear about this idea of consciousness is knowing altogether. So what they're suggesting here is that a Balanced Man can understand where an intellectually based person, or an emotionally based person, or a body sensation person is coming from, and can relate, even if they didn't originate from there, but they can understand, oh, okay, this person's coming from that perspective, and I can see it and I can understand it. It's like looking back and saying the elephant is all of these things.
Mm,
Right. So you can see, and you can also understand for people's positions. Like it says here, you would understand each other, you would no longer judge each other, and you can receive help from divine influence. You're open. Okay.
okay. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else I want to say here. All seven levels of consciousness exist within us and are accessible to each one of us to one extent or another. This shows that this chart shows humanity has a scale. You hear about scale, right? The scale is within them. They can reach higher and they can go lower. So whatever your scale of being is right now, there's so much potentiality to be higher. But guess what, friends? You can also go lower. I mean, we could go down into some deep, dark places and really be much more violent than we are now. So you can go kind of up the scale of being or down in this sort of vertical way, which we'll discuss here shortly. If all humanity could reach this man number 4, Balanced Man, or what is also called the third state of consciousness, all wars would stop immediately and people would understand one another, but this cannot happen. This work is not for people who want to change the world. This is really important, guys. This work is not for people who want to change the world. It is for those who wish to change themselves. When we change, our world changes. But this idea of like all of consciousness raising at one time, that's never happened since the beginning of humanity. It's never raised. We're technologically more advanced, but look around what's happening. Is humanity not dead asleep? It's no different in 2025 than it was 2,000 years ago on a collective level, but there are individuals that can transform. And that's what it's talking about here. We're talking about changing ourselves so our world changes. They talk about the cross diagram. And we all know the Christian symbol of the cross. And so the best way that I've done is to describe this as breaking the axes apart. So the image that has been most helpful in my journey in the work is this. It provides me a mental visual of my life in the horizontal plane. So the horizontal part of the cross is what we call horizontal time, right? So that includes your living life, your chronological life, from past to present to future. There's a vertical line that speaks to the quality or the scale of your life at any moment. The intersection is the present moment, right? So there's your cross. So chronologically, we are aging, we are changing physically as we age, but we aren't necessarily transforming in terms of our being. The quality or scale of our being is that intersection point at any given time. So we're always in the present moment, and it's a matter of where are we vertically in this intersection with horizontal time and space that determines the quality of our being or the scale of our being. Okay, and we'll get into that. There's no concept of time in the vertical either. One's level of being corresponds to the quality of what you are in the moment. Okay. Now, the second version of this that I want to share is when we are at higher levels of consciousness. So when we are, say, in that area where we're experiencing higher emotional and higher intellectual centers. When we're at higher levels of consciousness, we experience higher states. And you can think about states as energies. You can think about when you feel when you feel very present, can you feel the lightness of that? Like, can you literally just feel, oh my gosh, I'm just really present. Where when we're in lower energies, you can feel this, it almost has a physical density of just contraction. So the higher that we are, the higher state that we are is a finer quality of energy. They are less dense. Human beings are born as self-developing organisms and can evolve or rise from one point to a higher point in the scale. So the scale resembles a ladder. So you can look at it like this. So if you happen to be in that moment where everything is negative, and this is your intersection point, the quality or the scale of your being is going to be lower versus if you were in a place where you're staying present, the work ideas are coming to you, you're looking at this person and say, wow, I really don't enjoy this person, but if I really could understand this person, I wouldn't disagree with them. So it frees you from resentment and anger. Then you might find that you're intersecting at a higher point. Does that make sense? So your scale of being is where you're intersecting horizontal time at any point. And that can be lower or that can be higher. So to pass from one point in the vertical line to a higher point, a thing must be transformed. It must become different from what it was at a lower level. But we don't transform ourselves. We don't transform ourselves. Remember that, guys. We make efforts. Remember the boat analogy, right? You take care of your boat and you put your sail up. That's called making efforts in the work. But we don't work for results. We don't make efforts for results because we expect a certain outcome. That's a hard thing to kind of learn because it's countercultural to the way that we're taught, right? We're taught that we can make change and we just need to apply those efforts. But that's not how it works in the work. We make efforts and we learn to be present to them regardless of the outcomes. Okay. It is our job, if we choose to accept it, to take care of our boat and to put our sail up. God does the transforming, just like God provides the wind that moves our boats, that moves us. Our efforts create the fertile soil for God to grow us, right? So what we do is we tend to the soil, but we don't put the sun on it and we don't water it. The horizontal line, again, represents chronological time, which is the line of change. The vertical line is timeless. Transformation is not the same. Make sure we get this. Transformation is not the same as something changing through time. Everything changes in time. We're getting older. I'm getting fatter. Everything's changing through time. But the passage of time does not transform a thing. You can go through life and never transform. You can never move up vertically, but I can move horizontally. Your real I is at a higher level of being, a higher level of consciousness, a higher level already existing within you. It does not lie ahead of you in chronological time. It lies above you in every moment, even this moment. You guys understand that? So your real I is here. At any moment, you can move up or down this intersection with the present moment. All of the teaching in the Gospels is about ascending the vertical line to reach the kingdom of heaven, because an individual can rise in this vertical scale. Everybody okay with that? Just understanding it generally? Okay. So this is what they're talking about with Jacob's ladder in Genesis. The ladder represents the universe as seen in its vertical height and depth. And Jacob represents at the bottom, represents humanity asleep at the bottom of the ladder. And the level of development existing in him is above him. Genesis 28:12. And he dreamed that there was a ladder set upon the earth, the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. So think about that as the vertical line of your cross. What we're trying to do is ascend that vertical line, that ladder, but there's humanity at the bottom, asleep. I think it's a good depiction of what they're trying to talk about there with your scale of being. Okay, so level of being. To understand the cross diagram requires that we understand more fully what being means. In general, a person's being is made up of everything in their character. More subtly, it has to do with the goodness and the quality of one's character, which is defined by the quantity of goodness in it. We all have a range of different levels of being in us. What we experience at any point in chronological time is the result of our level of being at that point in time, in that particular moment, in that particular present moment. So you can verify this by noticing at times when you feel kind-hearted or gentle, and at times when you feel almost a violent rage. You can feel the difference, right? But your general level of being will balance out somewhere between. We can observe that some people, or even ourselves, can exhibit a very low level of being as evidenced by many forms of violence and negativity or even criminality. And there are some who have and exhibit a very high level of being close to saintliness. You can think of MLK, you can think of Mahatma Gandhi, you can think of these people and go, wow, there's something about those people that's very different. Their level of being is very high, and you can just sense it by being around them. Humanity lives and thrives by meaning. Meaninglessness is a death-dealing condition for us psychologically. We all want to have meaning. Meaning comes from above, derived from the absolute. That's what they call God in the work, descending down to us like Jacob's ladder. Transformation of meaning is possible for a person as their level of being changes as it increases. You can lean into that. And so there's a work idea that's introduced here in this particular section of the book by Rebecca Nottingham, which I think is one of the most difficult work ideas in all of the work ideas. For me, anyway, maybe other people kind of get this. But the work idea is that your being attracts your life. This one is really hard because a lot of times people will apply this around this idea of karma. If something bad happens to me, I must have had a low level of being, and it was the karmic outcome. That's not at all what it's talking about. And if you ever are around anybody that's facilitating work teaching to you and suggests that, oh, your being drew your life, if something bad happens, I get up and walk out. Because that's not the application. And I've been very firm with our group about this. This means that you might have a real big, so the circumstance today that happened with the fence and the lumber, I could have spiraled into a shithole today. It was like traffic, and then, this young girl pulled out in front of me and all the lumber, I could have watched the violence just ramp up. but having the ability to have, as Josh mentioned, reach for a rope. The rope was, I have a right not to be negative. It changed things. It changed things. So it's not that my outcome was any different. I still had to bring the lumber here for the people to fix the fence. But my inner disposition, my inner state was wholly different than it could have been if I just felt the mechanicality of negativity and decided to go with it. That's what it's suggesting. It doesn't mean that you're changing your life circumstances. They may still, somebody may still be dealing with the cancer diagnosis. You're not talking about that person had a low level of being because they got cancer. If anybody ever insinuates that, I'm telling you guys, like, game over, like, enough. That's absolutely the wrong application of this work idea. Does everybody understand it? It's hard. It's a hard nuance to understand. It's saying, wow, I can change my mind about what's happening, but it's not like the event itself is any different than if I was negative. Do you guys follow what I'm saying? So it's about your level of being. It should say your level of being attracts your life, meaning that you might be able to handle a very difficult situation much more peacefully, much more with much more harmony than if you just let the mechanicality run in the past. Like I was just thinking, oh my God, how lucky am I today that this man showed up and was willing to fix my fence in the same day. I was worried about like deer running in my yard. Like I was just like, I don't even know who to call. And the person showed up. And so even though I was aggravated, I had to go to Home Depot. It was like, I'm so grateful. And it got done. But it's not because my life wasn't better because they fixed my fence. It was just allowing me to say, wow, I could get really mechanically negative about all this crap. Yet this person's asking me for my drill because they don't have one because they're fixing my fence. It's just different, right? I don't know if that's a good analogy to explain to you or not, but that's how I work with that work idea. They bring it up here, so I wanted to share it. Okay, we're doing okay on time? Good, we're doing okay. We're almost done. Okay, so yes. So again, it's this idea of your being draws your life. Is like, where are you intersecting that vertical line? What is your level of being at this present moment of intersection, which would be intersecting the horizontal line, right? Is it there or is it there? Okay, and you'll have these slides as well. The realm of heaven is within you. We've all heard that from scripture. Luke 17:21. The kingdom of God is among you. And in Metanoia Journey, we often take the G out of kingdom because we're trying to get away from patriarchal language. So we'll use the word kingdom a lot. But that comes from the NRSV translation. And the English translation of the Greek entos, which is the word among, actually also means within or inside. So Jesus was saying that something higher exists within you and is accessible to you, but just not yet as you currently are in terms of your level of being. Okay. Humankind for ages has tried to find this realm of heaven within using different approaches. They constitute the four ways. And the four ways are this. The first way is the way of the fakir. That's the first way. So in this, for a fakir, it's about physical mastery. So what these people are trying to do is they're trying to overcome the body, man number one, the body. So it's about physical mastery, which corresponds to man number one. They want to develop a physical will, a power over the body. If you just Google fakir, you'll see all kinds of images of these people putting their bodies in crazy positions of discomfort for long periods of time to overcome the uncomfortable sensation of the body. They're just trying to get will over the body. They'll lay on a bed of nails for days and weeks and months. It's interesting. But the problem with the fakir in this particular way is they're focused on the body. They're not developing their emotional or intellectual side. The way of the monk, which is called the second way, is about emotional mastery, which corresponds with man number two, or the heart emotions. The disciplines, the emotions by developing of faith and religious feelings. So there's, the monk's all about the heart and loving God and being and supplicating to God. And the whole approach is all about the heart. that develops a unity of will, but sometimes, I'm glad they say this here, it's not that the body and the mind don't develop here, but they may remain underdeveloped because the focus is on the emotional part, man number two. They may, and we'll get to that too. The third way is the way of the yogi. The way of the yogi is the way of knowledge, which corresponds with man number three, the intellectual man. It develops the mind and mastery over thoughts, develops a unity of will, but bodies and emotions may remain undeveloped, not always, but they may. But the thing that's interesting about what they have in common, all of the first three ways, is that from the very beginning, practitioners of fakir or monk or yogi, they must undergo a complete change of life, a renunciation of all worldly things, including family or friends, home, and attachments. They have to be set aside. Monasteries, camps, schools. The practitioners go into a monastery or school in order to attain any unity of will in one of these ways. And then, friends, there's the fourth way. The fourth way, which we will practice with the work. The fourth way develops a unified will in and through life. So guess what? We have jobs and we have relationships and we have everyday things that we live. We're not separating, we're not changing our lives. We're learning to do this stuff in and through our life that we're in. It does not require that a person give up or renounce everything in one's life. The circumstances of our very lives are the best possible conditions for us to be in order to work for the work to find us. I think that's a really important line, guys. So whatever your circumstances in your current life, in your past life, are the best possible conditions. The soil that God gave you for you to do your work in, to look back on those past situations that Vanessa and Thomas shared with us earlier. That's food for you. There's meat on the bone for you there. So the work is going to come from your life because that's the best circumstance for it to be. We can follow the work while remaining in our usual conditions of life, maintaining our current relationships with people, etc. And in the fourth way, guys, life is our school. Everyday life is your school. Okay. I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly, but so they're also they have lots of things. They've got different different types of man, and they've got different levels of consciousness. They got what's called 4 bodies of man. Not super important in the early going, but just to say it. The teaching is that man, living in the given physical body, is capable of developing 3 further bodies of finer energies. Man is given by the universe an organized physical body, which works, but not a psychological body. Remember, the emotional and intellectual centers we gain and acquire through life. The second body, the emotional body, results from the emotions affecting the first body. The third body, which is the intellectual body, are thoughts proceeding from the emotions of the second body. And then the fourth is the will body, which is where the potential for spiritual development is located. Slide's a little wonky, but you'll get the general idea. Is that what you just need to take away from this is that our physical body was given to us. Everything else we acquire, and everything else through higher emotional and higher intellectual center can be the areas where we can find what they're calling here will body or balanced man. There's lots of different ways we can sort of look at this, but the terminology is extensive. Okay. I want to stop here. I got a couple minutes left, but anybody have any questions about that before I share what we're going to kind of play around with tonight?
Maybe a quick one, David.
Yeah.
Just a clarification, is levels of being, are there times when levels of being is related to mood, or are they always separate?
Could be related to mood. How do you define mood?
Like my mood when I haven't eaten lunch, I'm like 3-4 hours past lunch and I stub my toe.
Oh, you're hangry. Well, I don't know. I mean, I feel like that's a physical sensation, Josh. I don't know. I feel like I think physical depletion makes us more emotional, generally speaking. Um, I think that's a tough question to say it's a mood. I mean, I think I can concede that that when my mood is peaceful and harmony focused and accepting and open and yielding, there's often a chance that I'm going to be able to take that life impression in a different way than if I'm angry. I never had anybody ask me about mood as it relates, but I would suggest there's probably some connection to it. Although I think our moods can change. I mean, somebody can have. I mean, I'm sure that Mahatma Gandhi gets pretty aggravated once in a while, but his general level of being is very high. I mean, he could stub his toe, he could be hangry. I mean, I can imagine that being the case. I mean, Jesus flipped tables too, right? So I don't necessarily think it's 100% related to mood. I mean, I think that's a passing thing. I think a level of being can be more of a general state that can, because I don't think your level of being jumps up and down. I think it moves, depending
makes
on
sense.
influences. Yeah.
Yeah, if I get a free coffee, I'm jazzed about it. It doesn't mean like my level has jumped. Yeah, it's something beyond that.
Yeah, but if it leads you to, buying the coffee for the person they're driving behind you, maybe there's some effect to that, right? Paying it forward. Yeah, good question. Anybody else? Peter? Yeah.
I have a thought question. I mean, you said humanity as a whole cannot evolve, individuals can. But there's also the talk in the work about there was a golden age and we have degraded.
Mm. Mm.
The work,
Right.
The cosmology is really the widest picture of a cosmology that is around, but it does not talk in terms of Gebserian consciousness development. Gebser would say that our intellectual center is really only since about 2,500 years really online, separated. So and he would say that the archaic is sort of kingdom of heaven integration. That's where the origin is. Is that a possible explanation? I mean, that some of the problems we have today are really only around for a while. The Renaissance has amplified that intellectual thing. And I'm just saying that dimension seems to be somehow not there, but it's fine. It's just we have to be probably aware that it's a current thing, right? So
yeah,
we would have a different language about centers probably 4,000-5,000 years ago if they talked at all.
right.
So we created it somehow out of the intellectual center coming out. It's just a thought.
Yeah.
But there is this idea that we degraded.
That's a great point. I don't think that what they're talking about when they're suggesting this is whether you believe that the Adam and Eve story was real or if that's metaphor.
No, that's not what I'm going. It says we can only today learn through the intellectual center. There has to be metanoia first. But and so in the golden age, there was no need. We could hear directly, the heart could understand. So is that because we created this problem with the intellectual center that now, anyway, so that
I'd love to. That would be a great offline conversation because I think that I agree with when the intellectual center became much more prevalent within human beings, this idea that we know this, what we call this sin of certainty. I think that created a lot of division as we've gone along. Like I said, we've gotten intellectually smarter, but consciously we have not evolved. Like I said, we've got technology that can do this, that, and the other, but we're still bombing each other. The history is for sure a fact that of 97% of known human history, the people have been at war for 97% of the time. And it's just because it's my ideology is right and yours is wrong. Right. So it's people that are asleep trying to convince other people that are asleep that they're right or that they're wrong. And there's not knowing altogether. Like balanced man was knowing altogether and feeling, and consciousness is feeling altogether, or conscience is feeling altogether. Conscious is knowing altogether. That's not what's happening. I mean, everyone is divisive. Everyone has their own position. So I think what we're talking about in terms of transfer, and as a humanity, I don't think that we've evolved. And I know that they mentioned that in the work as the golden age, but I think I don't know that I personally buy that myself in terms of it. At one point, that's what they're suggesting, was that Adam and Eve were fallen because they decided they knew right from wrong. But whether that's metaphor, or maybe humanity was built this way all along. I mean, those are great ponderables we'll never have the answers for. But I think in general, the idea is that individuals can transform, but collectively humanity can't. It's not like my kids couldn't be born more conscious than me. They have their own individual journeys to consciousness. Right? I think that's, yeah.
10,000 years ago, people didn't have an individuality, so you couldn't transform it. But what didn't exist? They were part of group consciousness.
That's true. That's true. Yes, thank you. Good conversation. Well, okay, well, I know we've run a couple minutes past, so I didn't want to, let me just go ahead and share you what we're going to explore this week. And again, I invite anyone else that wants to join our Marco Polo group to do that. But take a life situation in which you found yourself feeling negative. This could be a live event or a circumstance or something that's happened in the past. We've had some people kind of talking about past events. Using observing eye, again, that one that just objectively looks non-judgmentally, just observe or notice what the body was doing or experiencing. So if you think about a particular event that you were negative, can you remember what your body was doing? Could you remember what the body sensation was doing? What the emotional center was feeling? What emotions, what were you feeling? And can you remember the interior dialogue that the intellectual center was thinking? What were the justifications? What was the rationale that it was using? And can you name them? So I had an emotion of this, I had a body sensation of that, and I noticed the thoughts were this. I'm feeling judged. I felt dismissed. I remember thinking this, and I noticed in my body I had chest pressure or the base of my skull, whatever. Pure and simple. Don't try to fix it or change the event. Just notice, creating space for objective observation. So all we're trying to do is learn to look at the different centers and see what was actually happening in a past event or something that happens, that's a live event tomorrow, the next day. And just go, what was I thinking? What was I feeling? What was the body doing? Okay? Check in on Marco Polo. Email us if you have any questions. But thank you for your time. I really enjoyed everyone leaning in, and it's so good to get to know my new friends and enjoy all of it. Okay. Well, you guys have a great evening, and stay safe out there. Take care, guys.